Okay, let's dive into this explainer and completely shatter a massive misconception we have about the history of science. When we picture the origins of modern scientific inquiry, we tend to imagine a very sterile, hyperlogical progression of ideas. But the actual history? Well, it's far more dramatic than that. It's essentially a 600-year love story, an eventual messy divorce between two incredibly powerful human emotions, wonder and curiosity.
We usually think of scientific inquiry as this purely objective, completely emotionless pursuit, right? We picture scientists in stark white coats strictly following the data. But the reality, at least according to the historical sources we're exploring today, is deeply rooted in very human passions. Science wasn't just born from a void of emotion. It was actively propelled by intense, sometimes conflicting feelings about the unknown.
This history completely upends our modern view. Before the Enlightenment, the most prominent figures investigating the natural world weren't cold, detached observers. Actually, they were passionate marvel hunters. They actively sought out the bizarre, the monstrous, and the unexplained. To really understand how we arrived at modern science, we have to look at how these thinkers actually felt about the mysteries they were uncovering.
So, let's map out this 600-year journey. We're going to briskly trace the evolving relationship between our two main characters, wonder and curiosity. We'll start in the High Middle Ages around 1150, move right through the Renaissance, into the Scientific Revolution, and finally hit a massive paradigm shift during the Enlightenment in the 18th century.
Part 1. The Medieval Age of Marvels.
Back in this era, wonder and curiosity were complete strangers, and they had incredibly different reputations. Medieval culture viewed wonder as highly respected. It was seen as a noble prelude to divine contemplation, basically a way to stand in pure awe of God's creation. Curiosity, on the other hand, that was considered a prideful, meddlesome sin. It was literally compared to lust or greed, an entirely inappropriate desire to pry into secrets that just weren't meant for you.
During this time, the elites were absolutely fascinated by the margins of the known world. Kings, abbots, and princes actively hoarded bizarre, seemingly magical marvels. We're talking magnetic lodestones, ostrich eggs, tails of barnacle geese, petrifying springs, and glowing gems they called carbuncles. And these objects didn't just sit collecting dust on a shelf. They vividly represented the immense wealth and power of the people who owned them, symbolizing their ultimate dominion over the natural world.
But not everyone was a fan of these marvels. In stark contrast to the princes, early scholastic philosophers at the newly formed universities, figures like Albertus Magnus, viewed wonder as a taboo mark of ignorance. For them, natural philosophy was strictly about finding absolute certainty and universal rules. If you felt wonder, it meant you didn't know the cause of something, which made it completely inappropriate for serious, rigorous study.
Part 2. Renaissance Cabinets of Curiosities.
Now, the Renaissance sets the perfect stage for the meet-cute of our two passions. The discovery of the New World flooded Europe with all sorts of oddities, leading to the creation of the Wunderkammer, or Cabinet of Curiosities. These were dedicated wonder chambers where incredibly rare, exotic objects were proudly displayed. Crucially, these physical spaces became the exact arenas where the awe of wonder and the inquiring nature of curiosity finally began to interact and mingle among the cultural elite.
And the things they collected were wild. Two-headed cats, exotic New World species, elaborate optical illusions, and bizarre, intricate mechanical automata. The boundaries between what was natural and unnatural began to blur entirely, and this ambiguity absolutely thrilled the elite. These items went from being mere anomalies to highly prized, deeply analyzed curiosities.
Part 3. Bacon's New Scientific Vision. As we enter the early modern period, a formal marriage between wonder and curiosity is finally proposed, and it fundamentally changes how we study nature. The matchmaker here? Francis Bacon, a guy often called the father of modern science. Bacon boldly proposed a radical overhaul of learning. He argued that gathering what is rare, unusual, and marvelous wasn't some silly distraction. It was the absolutely necessary first step to reforming natural philosophy. He famously declared that wonder is the seed of knowledge.
Bacon realized that you absolutely need wonder to first notice a natural anomaly. That initial shock of wonder excites the mind, snapping it right out of its laziness, which then sparks the curiosity required to actually dig in and investigate its hidden causes. This three-step process was a massive, game-changing psychological shift for early scientists.
Part 4. Wonder and Curiosity United. By the mid-17th century, this psychological alliance became the absolute core of empirical, scientific investigation. The two passions were now a unified team. The
The philosopher René Descartes captured this perfectly. He called wonder the first of the passions, a sudden surprise of the soul. Descartes pointed out that without this initial burst of wonder, the human mind would just be way too lazy and unmotivated to engage in deep, curious observation. You literally needed the thrill of the marvel to kickstart the heavy lifting of science.
This dynamic duo fueled massive new institutions, like the newly formed Royal Society in London and the Paris Academy. These scientific societies absolutely devoured reports of strange marvels. They used brand new tools like microscopes to probe nature's invisible, subvisible secrets. Ravenous curiosity, which remember used to be a medieval sin, had now been completely transformed into a respectable, vital tool for exploring the unknown, guided entirely by the light of wonder.
Part 5. The Enlightenment's Strict Order.
But, as in many dramatic romances, the honeymoon doesn't last forever. The Enlightenment brought a dramatic paradigm shift. Thinkers aggressively moved away from a world of chaotic marvels and embraced a mechanical, clockwork universe. They wanted uniform natural laws, simplicity, and strict social order. In this highly regulated new worldview, nature's irregularities and bizarre anomalies were no longer celebrated. They were viewed as messy and unseemly. Because the objects of wonder were no longer valued, the emotion of wonder itself was fiercely demoted. Intellectuals completely stopped seeing it as a philosophical spark. Instead, wonder was downgraded to a vulgar, ignorant emotion. It got associated with superstition, religious enthusiasm, and the gawking mob. For the enlightened elite, expressing wonder was suddenly a giant red flag that you were uneducated and lacked refinement.
Curiosity, however, survived the divorce, but it completely changed its personality. It kept custody of science, sure, but it lost all of its pleasurable, ravenous thrill. Curiosity transformed into a sober, laborious work ethic. It became this disciplined virtue of earnest application, focused strictly on discovering uniform, universal laws, and completely abandoning the bizarre particulars it once loved.
Which brings us to today. As we look at the highly regulated, deeply specialized, and strictly objective world of modern inquiry, we really have to ask ourselves a profound question based on this history. By divorcing these two passions and banishing wonder from professional science, what exactly did we leave behind? It's a fascinating thought to leave you with, and I hope this explainer has sparked a bit of your own curiosity and wonder about the history of knowledge.